Welcome, dear traveler. If you've been here before, welcome back. If this is your first time, welcome to this quiet corner where forgotten history lingers. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where are you listening from tonight? And what time is it there? Feel free to leave a comment. It's always a comfort to see where our fellow night wanderers gather. And if you enjoy these soft, shadowed journeys through time, consider subscribing so you'll never miss the next one. Now, let's begin. Picture the heart of Europe. Not a single empire, but a patchwork. 1,000 states, cities, bishoprics, margraviates, each with its own laws, its own coin, its own flag. This was the Holy Roman Empire. Neither holy, nor Roman, nor much of an empire. But for those who lived within its borders, life could be cold, uncertain, and brutal. Imagine the fog settling over the cobblestones of an old imperial city. Nuremberg, perhaps, or Regensburg, or the twisted streets of Cologne. Stone walls sweat with damp. Iron grates hold fast in narrow windows. A merchant crosses the empty square, a folded letter clutched in a gloved hand. Salt from distant mines is stacked in barrels along the river docks, a bitter wealth guarded jealously. And overhead the spires of cathedrals pierce the mist, their bells slow and mournful. For women, the empire was a cold cage. Marriage was a transaction, alliances sealed with dowries and contracts. Behind heavy wooden doors, noblewomen paced long corridors, their lives mapped out in folded parchment and wax seals. The candle on her writing table burns low, its wax pooling beside an unopened letter. Outside, the city clock tolls the hour. Her husband rides south to the diet at Frankfurt, and she waits. For peasants, the burden was endless. Tithes to the church, taxes to the prince, tolls at every bridge and city gate. To move a cart of grain 10 leagues could mean 10 payments. The fields were cruel, soaked in rain or frozen stiff. Bread was coarse, black with mildew in lean years. And when the imperial armies marched, to Bohemia, to Italy, to Burgundy, it was the peasants who fed them, who suffered beneath their boots. For merchants, the empire was a maze. Every city walled, every lord hungry for tolls. A trader with fine cloth from Bruges might pass a dozen checkpoints before reaching Nuremberg. Coins changed hands in dark taverns. Deals sealed with quiet words over tankards of bitter ale. And always the fear that tomorrow some new edict would close the roads or open them to war. For soldiers, loyalty was a shifting thing. One year a knight rode for the emperor, the next for a margrave. Campaigns ground slowly through muddy fields. The siege of a stone tower could last for weeks. Armor rusted beneath the constant rain. And in the night camps, the clink of dice, the cough of sickness, the muted sob of a squire beneath a worn wool cloak. For scribes, there was work, but never certainty. In dim chambers beneath vaulted halls, they copied edicts and chronicles by flickering light. A misplaced phrase could cost a life. An ill-chosen word could doom a town. And when the ink ran dry, the scratching quills fell silent, replaced by whispers and fear. The empire breathed in fog and iron. Its cities pulsed with silent commerce and sudden violence. And through every stone corridor, beneath every vaulted nave, the shadows gathered still. And deep within the stone, a voice waited still. Across the expanse of the Holy Roman Empire, the cities clung to their stones like lichens on ancient bark. Each city-state a world unto itself, encircled by high stone walls, guarded by ironclad gates, pierced by narrow archways where sunlight rarely touched the ground. In the heart of Nuremberg, morning came slowly. A pale gray light seeped through thick cloud and drifting mist. Beneath the great clock tower, the square lay empty, but for a single cart of turnips. its wheels sinking into the damp. A town crier's voice echoed thinly in the fog. Proclamations from some distant elector. Few stopped to listen. Fewer cared. For the townsfolk, life beat to older rhythms. The tolling of the cathedral bell. The rattle of iron keys in the guild hall. The soft thud of a merchant's ledger closing at dusk. Within the merchant's quarter, life wore a thin veil of wealth. Behind carved oak doors, velvet robes whispered across cold stone floors. Ledgers bound in calfskin held the secrets of fortunes made and lost. Yet even here, beneath the gleam of candelabra, mildew crept along the base of walls. Salt air from distant seas fouled the silks brought from Venice, and beneath every trade agreement lay the slow threat of ruin. For merchants, the empire was not so much ruled as bartered. No emperor's hand touched every market. Power lay in guild charters, in family alliances sealed with careful words and coin. A simple letter carried by a lone courier through snowbound passes might shift the fortunes of an entire house. One such letter now lay upon a table in a darkened room. Its seal, broken, its words, grim. A ship lost in the North Sea, cargo gone, debts remain. A thin woman, her hair bound beneath a dark veil, traced her finger slowly over the faded script. She inhaled, exhaled. The candle beside her flickered low, its light casting trembling shadows across the worn wood. Beyond the shuttered window, the wind pressed cold fingers against the glass. A knock might come, from creditor or cousin, she did not know. She waited. For peasants. Life unfolded beyond the walls, amid fields sodden with winter rain. Thatched roofs sagged beneath the weight of the damp. Frost gripped the earth until midday, and when it thawed, mud rose in thick waves. Children fetched water from a stream choked with dead leaves. Their mother kneaded dark rye into coarse loaves, her hands red with cold. Above the hearth, slabs of salted pork hung beside twisted bundles of herbs, the only defense against lean weeks ahead. In a village near Würzburg, an old man bent low over a patch of frozen earth. With a bone-handled knife, he traced the faded lines of last year's planting. The emperor might reign in distant Aachen or Mainz or Frankfurt. It mattered little here. The cycle of seasons ruled these lives more than any crown. And yet, the empire touched even this humble place. A tax collector's cart rumbled down the muddy lane, escorted by 2 men-at-arms. Their cloaks hung stiff with frost. Their boots tracked muck into the small stone church, where a clerk unrolled a brittle scroll. Oaths were sworn, tithes counted, grain measured. And when the cart departed, it carried away not only barley and coin, but the village's hope of warmth through the long nights ahead. For scribes, the world shrank to parchment and ink. In dim chambers beneath the monastery of Bamberg, Brother Anselm copied the words of ancient law. His breath clouded in the chill air. The quill scratched on vellum, slow and steady. A single mistake could mean lashes, an ill-formed letter, suspicion. For in these days, heresy wore many guises. He paused, eyes weary. A drop of ink trembled on the tip of the quill. Outside, snow whispered against leaded glass. A bell tolled somewhere beyond the cloister. He dipped the quill once more, and in the chamber's cold hush, the ink flowed on, and through forgotten corridors, soft footsteps echoed. Within the stone embrace of the cities, life wound on, narrow, twisting, and slow. The streets of Regensburg lay like a tangled web, drawn tight between crumbling walls. Their names, ancient, their stones, worn smooth by centuries of passing feet. Above them, timbered houses leaned close as if in quiet conspiracy. Below, the air hung damp and heavy, tinged with smoke and salt. Fog crept through the alleys long after dawn, coiling around iron grates and dripping from rusted chains. Footsteps rang faint upon slick cobbles. A child hurried past with a basket of gray turnips, scarf pulled high against the cold. Behind her a wooden shutter slammed shut, more to keep fear out than cold in. For many, the Holy Roman Empire's cities were not places of glory, but of grinding need. Merchants might tally fortunes in candle-lit halls, and bishops might dine beneath vaulted ceilings. But for most, life pressed close and hard. For women, the streets offered little mercy. Beneath layers of worn wool and linen, they moved through the fog with wary eyes. A widow might sell herbs from a small stall, her hands red from washing roots in icy water. A young seamstress might stitch late into the night, candle guttering low beside her. Each day held its own calculation: to cross the square, to linger near the guild hall, to risk a glance at the passing guards. In a narrow chamber above a tannery, two sisters worked by flickering lamplight. One patched a faded cloak, fingers calloused from needle and thread. The other bent over a basket of damp linen, steam rising from her breath. Below their window, the tannery vats fumed, acrid and sour, the stench of hides mingling with the city's breath. Neither spoke of tomorrow. Such plans belonged to another world. For peasants come to market, the city was a maze of tolls and tricks. To bring a sack of grain within the walls meant coin at the gate, coin at the square, coin at the guild hall's shadowed desk. Each hand reached out, smooth-palmed, hungry, waiting. And when the day's trade was done, there remained the long road home, through woods where wolves moved beneath bare branches. At the market's edge, an old man crouched beside a battered cart. His wares, a few wooden spoons, a single pot of sour cheese. His breath rose in thin clouds as the city bustled past him. Coins were rare, a kind word rarer still. For merchants, behind gilded facades, fear walked softly. A missed payment, a rival's whisper, a lord's whim. Any might turn fortune to ash. In the counting rooms, tallies grew ever longer. Ink-stained fingers trembled beneath velvet sleeves. At night, letters were sealed with wax, dispatched in haste. Not all would find their mark. In a house along the Salzmarkt, a merchant paced beneath a hanging tapestry. His gaze flicked to the locked chest at the room's center. Inside, promissory notes, salt contracts, a slender dagger. Outside, voices rose in a heated argument. He paused, listened, and the candle before him burned lower still. For soldiers in the city, life shifted between boredom and brutality. Patrols through the twisting lanes yielded little, a drunkard here, a shouted quarrel there. But the air held tension, like a drawn bowstring. Rumors whispered of new wars beyond the mountains. Another levy, another march, another season of blood and smoke. In a cramped guardroom, 3 men shared coarse bread and thin ale. Their cloaks steamed where snow had melted through. One spoke of his home, far to the east, where frost split the stone of ancient towers. The others listened in silence. For in this city of shadow and stone, few dreams held fast. As dusk fell, the fog deepened. Lamps guttered behind thick glass. A bell tolled once, twice, thin and hollow in the evening hush. Shutters closed. Bolts slid home. And in the narrow alleys, beneath hanging banners limp with damp, figures moved unseen. And across the cold beams, shadows gathered in silence. Beneath the stones of the Empire's cities, a quieter world breathed. Low-arched corridors wound beneath guild halls and churches, beneath the palaces of electors and the inns of merchants. Their stones were slick with age, their air thick with the scent of dust and damp. Here, the Empire whispered to itself. In the city of Mainz, such corridors ran deep. Torchlight flickered along narrow walls. Iron sconces held half-melted candles, their light barely touching the darkness beyond. Steps echoed, slow, deliberate. A clerk descended with a bundle of folded parchment bound in faded twine. The documents would not see the light of day again, for in these chambers the Empire's other face took form, the face of suspicion, the face of control. Here, beneath the great cathedral, the Inquisition held its records. Not the grand trials of heresy sung of in distant courts, but the slow, creeping watchfulness of the cities. For scribes, this was dangerous work. Johann, a thin man with ink-stained cuffs, moved with careful hands. Before him lay a long ledger. Names, dates, accusations, rumors. A wrong entry could mean ruin. An unguarded glance, death. Yet the pay was steady, and the winter outside was long. He dipped his quill, eyes flickering to the sealed letter at his side. A report from a distant town, whispers of unlicensed preaching, of pamphlets passed by night. His breath misted in the chill. The quill scratched onward. For women, such whispers could be fatal. A healer's herb lore passed from mother to daughter might draw the wrong eye. A word, a look, a patient who did not recover. Enough to summon the Inquisition's gaze. In a shuttered house near the fish market, an old woman ground roots into powder. Her mortar moved in slow circles. Above her, shelves sagged beneath bundles of dried lavender, rue, and wormwood. Her niece watched with wide eyes. Tonight, a child burned with fever in the next room. Tomorrow, the streets would talk. For merchants, there was no safety in gold. A prosperous house might trade in silks and spices one month, and find its master behind iron bars the next. Envy bred accusations. Politics turned allies to enemies with the stroke of a quill. In a quiet office above the Kramergasse, a merchant named Marcus penned a careful letter. The words came slowly. Each line weighed for risk. A new levy threatened his contracts. A rival whispered of foreign sympathies. His hand trembled as he sealed the page with red wax. Outside, the night deepened. Some messages traveled quickly. Others did not return. For soldiers, the Inquisition was an unwelcome duty. Yet when the writs came, they obeyed. 2 men stood now in the torch-lit corridor, their breath rising white in the cold air. One gripped the haft of a spear. The other rubbed stiff fingers against the pommel of his sword. They did not speak. Words lingered here. Above, the bells of the cathedral tolled the hour. A slow, mournful sound, felt more than heard. Within the city's winding lanes, shutters closed. Candles burned low behind leaded glass. And in the silent courtyards of noble houses, shadows lengthened beneath carved stone faces. For some, the Inquisition was far away, a tale told in hushed voices. For others, it moved with each footstep, unseen but near. In the depths of the archive, Johann reached the end of his page. He blotted the ink, set aside the quill. A long breath escaped his lips. Far above, the city's life went on, carts rattling over frozen stones, voices raised in argument or song. But here, in this chamber of secrets, time stood still. He reached for the next parchment, and beneath worn velvet, the keys sang faintly once more. Above the damp stones of the city, dawn broke thin and gray. A faint bell called the hour. Through the low mist, banners hung limp from tall wooden poles, faded crimson, tattered gold. Today was a feast day, or so the notices claimed. Across the square, merchants laid out their goods beneath sagging awnings. Iron cauldrons steamed. Coarse cloth fluttered in the cold air. Spices, long since stale, were heaped in shallow bowls, their sharp scents mingling with the smell of wood smoke and unwashed bodies. For peasants come to the city, it was a rare chance to trade, a chance to see color amid the drabness of stone and soil. Yet the journey had been long, boots caked in mud, fingers numb beneath thin gloves, coins counted and recounted on the road. Would they be enough? At the edge of the square, a woman stood with a basket of coarse bread. Her shawl hung thin across narrow shoulders. Each loaf bore the marks of haste, dense, uneven, burned at the edges. Still, a few coins passed from palm to palm. A mother with 3 thin children tucked a small loaf beneath her cloak, eyes downcast. The city bustled, but beneath its surface lay a restless tension. Voices rose, bright, forced. A fiddler played a thin tune. A boy ran between the stalls, laughing once, then vanishing into the crowd. For women, feast days offered no true respite. At home, broth simmered over low flames. Cold seeped through shuttered windows. Children waited for scraps of meat that might not come. And behind many doors, debts weighed heavier than any hunger. In a stone kitchen beneath the guild house, a cook stirred a vast pot. The broth was thin, more water than stock. 2 scrawny hens had given what little they could. Above, the guild masters prepared to dine. Below, the servants waited, bowls ready, faces drawn. For merchants, the feast was display, a time to be seen, to exchange greetings, to count who stood with whom. Beneath their fine cloaks, ledgers whispered of debts unpaid, of favors owed. And as the banners swayed in the damp wind, the calculations continued. In a corner of the square, an aged moneylender watched. His fingers tapped a slow rhythm on the worn wood of his stall. Clients came in 1s and 2s, a nod, a coin, a folded scrap of paper sealed with wax. Their words were soft, their eyes wary. For soldiers, the feast meant duty. 2 men stood watch beneath the great archway, their armor dulled by rain, cloaks stiff with cold. A boy offered them a flagon of ale, thin and sour. One drank. The other shook his head, gaze fixed on the crowd. Rumors had stirred of unrest. A cart overturned last market day, a brawl in the fishmonger's lane. For now, the square held together beneath the weight of custom and caution. But beneath the banners, the streets remained the same, narrow, cold, watching. For scribes, feast days were a double burden, decrees to be posted, edicts read aloud to a crowd that scarcely listened. And always the quiet watchfulness, who spoke with whom, who lingered too long in shadowed doorways. Brother Lucas stood by the chancery steps, scroll in hand. His voice rang thinly over the murmur. A new levy decreed, a feast proclaimed. Few heeded the words, but still he spoke them. And when the scroll was rolled once more, his eyes scanned the crowd, noting, recording, remembering. As the sun climbed pale behind drifting clouds, the square grew thick with bodies. Children wove between legs. Vendors shouted half-hearted praises of their wares. And above it all, the tolling of the cathedral bells rang out, solemn, distant. The banners stirred once, then stilled. And beneath them, beneath the sound and color, hunger waited still. And in the hollow dark, the breath of stone grew stronger. Night fell slowly over the city. The last of the pale light faded behind clouds heavy with rain. Shadows lengthened across stone facades. Stalls were struck, banners gathered in sodden bundles. The crowd thinned, voices swallowed by the encroaching dark. One by one, iron grates slid across shop fronts. Locks turned with soft, reluctant clicks. Windows shuttered, doors bolted. The city closed in upon itself, for the streets after dusk were no place for comfort. In the narrow alleys, the fog returned, thicker now, tasting of soot and cold stone. The lamps along the main thoroughfare burned weakly, their glow smothered by the mist. Beyond them, darkness pressed close. Footsteps rang sharp in the empty square. A lone figure crossed beneath the shadow of the clock tower, cloak drawn tight against the chill. a letter clutched in one gloved hand, bound for a house beyond the river. Each step quickened, each breath rose in silver clouds, and from the depths of the lane behind, a second set of footsteps followed, soft, measured, unseen. For women, the night was a thing to be feared. Doors were double-bolted, curtains drawn tight, candles burned low in corners where shadows pooled. And yet, sleep came fitfully, for no lock could keep out rumor, and no wall could quiet the restless wind. In a narrow room above the weaver's lane, a young woman watched the street below. Her loom stood idle, a single candle guttered on the sill. A knock had come at dusk, too soft, too soon. She had not answered. Now she waited, breath held. Outside the fog thickened, for peasants still within the walls. The hour brought unease. Many sought the shelter of alehouses and inns, their coins spent quickly for a measure of warmth and light. But soon, even those doors would close. And then, the long walk through twisting lanes, each step slower than the last. An old man lingered at the threshold of the Black Boar, hands wrapped around an empty cup. His face was lined deep with years, eyes clouded with weariness. The innkeep shook his head. Closing time had come, and so, with shoulders hunched beneath a tattered cloak, the old man stepped into the fog. For merchants, the night was both shield and threat. In high chambers behind barred windows, ledgers were closed, locks checked twice, letters left upon tables to be sent at first light, or burned if the winds shifted. Alliances forged in the brightness of the feast might crumble by dawn, and in the hush between midnight hours, knives found purpose in the dark. In a richly furnished room above the goldsmith's hall, a man stood before a tall mirror. A blade lay upon the table beside him. Its edge caught the flicker of a single lamp. Behind him, folded parchment sealed with black wax. A debt unpaid, a threat delivered. The hour for choices had passed. For soldiers, the city belonged to them now. Pairs of boots echoed down empty streets. Halberds gleamed faint beneath the lanterns. Eyes searched every shadow, every doorway. For though the feast had ended without blood, the night remained long, and old grudges stirred in the dark. 2 guards paused beneath the iron gate, breath misting in the cold. One shifted his grip upon the spear. The other scanned the alley beyond, black as pitch, no sound. Yet both felt the unseen weight of the city's breath. For scribes, sleep came late, if at all. By thin candlelight, reports were penned, names marked, faces described, small offenses noted, debts recorded, and in some cases, questions left unasked. Brother Lucas sat once more at his desk, quill moving with weary precision. Outside, the bells had ceased. The city held its breath. A final line completed, he reached for the sand to dry the ink. The candle's flame guttered low, and through forgotten corridors, soft footsteps echoed. Above the sleeping city, the towers stood watch, dark silhouettes against a starless sky, stone against cloud, age against time. The tallest, the Watcher's Tower, rose from the heart of the old quarter. Its narrow windows flickered faintly with lamplight. Within, the watchman moved through long-forgotten passages, keys at his belt, lamp in hand. Each hour he climbed the winding stair, stone worn smooth by countless feet. At the tower's summit, the city lay shrouded. Fog pressed thick between crooked rooftops. Lanterns swayed on long iron arms, their glow swallowed within a few short paces. The streets below, silent, empty, yet not all slept. For soldiers, the night shift was a slow march through shadow. Pairs moved along the outer wall, their boots muffled by damp. Breath rose in slow clouds. Eyes watched each shuttered window, each darkened lane. Old oaths held them steady. But the night had its own hunger. Near the east gate, 2 guards paused beneath the ancient arch. One leaned against a frost-veined column. The other peered into the gloom beyond the city wall. A lone wolf's cry echoed faintly through the trees. They exchanged no words. Some things were better left unspoken. For women, the night brought labor without end. In the low quarters, spindles turned beneath thin lamplight. Bread was needed for the morrow. Children soothed through restless sleep. In a narrow room above the tanner's lane, a young mother rocked her infant. The child's fever burned hot. Her own body swayed with exhaustion. Outside, footsteps passed, steady, distant. She prayed they would not pause. For merchants, certain trades thrived in the dark. Wagons moved through side gates under seal of night. Deals whispered in cold cellars. Coins changed hands without a word. In a damp storeroom beneath the river quay, 2 figures stood beneath a swaying lamp. Bundles of cloth lay stacked beside barrels marked with foreign script. A contract was signed in haste. A silver ring pressed into wax. Then, silence. One man slipped away through the shadows. The other remained, counting slowly beneath his breath. For scribes, the deepest hours belong to ink and memory. In the cathedral's scriptorium, Brother Lucas worked alone. The great hall lay hushed, save for the soft scratch of his quill. Each name he wrote weighed heavy. Each line etched the night deeper. He paused, fingers trembling above the page. The candle beside him burned low, its wax pooling slow and thick. Beyond the leaded glass, fog licked at the stones. A lone bell tolled the hour, soft, distant. Lucas dipped his quill once more. For peasants who found no shelter. The night was cold stone and colder fear. An old woman crouched beneath the eaves of a shuttered inn. Her shawl wrapped thin about her, hands clasped against her chest. Each breath shallow, each moment stretched long. She watched as a lone cart passed, its wheels groaning against the frost-hardened mud. A lantern swung from its axle. Within, a child's voice murmured, a lullaby lost to the night. Then the cart was gone, and silence pressed close once more. Above it all, the watchman marked the hour. A single note sounded from the great bronze bell. Its echo rolled through stone and fog, fading slowly into the dark. And beneath the nave, a forgotten light flickered alone. Within the stone ribs of the city, a quieter pulse remained. As the bells marked the midnight hour, the streets fell still. Yet beneath their worn arches, in chambers of wood and iron, the forge fires still burned. For craftsmen, the night was a time of secrets, contracts fulfilled in darkness, tools shaped in silence. And beneath the heavy eye of the guild, work pressed on. In the smithy near the southern gate, coals glowed a deep, sullen red. Iron bars lay stacked against soot-blackened stone. A single hammer rose and fell, slow, deliberate. Each strike echoed through the thick air. Sparks flared, then died. Master Gunther worked alone this night. The forge bellows wheezed with each breath, stirring the embers. Before him, a blade took form, thin, strong, its edge kissed by fire. His hands moved with practiced grace, yet his eyes flicked often toward the shuttered window. For in the Holy Roman Empire, guilds ruled more than trade. They ruled knowledge. Secrets passed from master to apprentice beneath oaths of iron and smoke. To forge without sanction was to risk ruin. To succeed without guild favor, worse. For apprentices, the night held its own lessons. Beneath the joiner's hall, young Otto shaped wood beneath flickering lamplight. His plane moved slow across the grain. A chair leg, simple but strong. Each shaving curled like a pale ribbon, falling soft to the floor. His master slept above, Yet the order had come late. The piece must be finished by dawn. Otto worked in silence, his fingers numb, his mind tracing each line, each curve. Beyond the thin walls, the city breathed slow and deep. For women of the craft, the night was a rare solitude. In a weaver's loft near the Salzmarkt, Marta worked her loom. Thread by thread, she shaped a narrow band of deep green silk, not for market, but for the private order of a noble house. The price would be good, if it pleased, if it passed unseen. Her shuttle moved steady beneath the worn beams. Beside her, a small oil lamp guttered low. From time to time, she paused to flex aching fingers, eyes weary but sharp. Each knot counted, each flaw marked. For scribes within the guild's employ, the night brought its own script. In a cold chamber above the mason's hall, Brother Lucas copied contract clauses onto fresh parchment. The words were dense, their meaning layered deep. A transfer of property, a veiled alliance, a debt masked as gift. His quill moved with slow precision. To miss a clause was to summon wrath. To err was worse. Beneath his breath, he mouthed each word. The ink gleamed wet and black beneath the candle's trembling light. For merchants tied to the craft halls, the stakes ran high. In a small counting room, beneath carved oak beams, Herr Albrecht weighed gold against obligation, a loan taken in trust, a shipment overdue. The scroll before him bore 3 seals, one fresh, 2 cracked. Time pressed thin, and gold could not buy favor twice. His fingers drummed soft upon the chest beside him. Within, the old ledgers waited. Names faded, debts that reached through generations. Outside, a distant bell tolled once. He reached for the key. For soldiers, even the forges spoke of war. A blade ordered here, a helm there. Not all was meant for parade. At the smithy's door, 2 guards paused. Their knock was soft, deliberate. Master Gunther opened slow, eyes wary. "A moment," one said. "A blade for the captain." Wordless, the smith stepped back. Within the forge's glow, steel met gaze. The guards waited, silent. And as the hammer rose once more, its ring met the stone, the fog, the unseen air. And through the unseen cracks, salt whispered faintly still. Beyond the noise of forge and market, the houses of the great families stood in deep shadow, their facades, pale stone etched with age, their windows, dark beneath carved lintels. Behind thick oak doors, the city's true pulse beat, slow, silent, unseen. Within one such house near the Kanzlergasse, tapestries stirred faintly in a draught unseen. Velvet draped heavy across tall windows. The hearth glowed low, a single bed of coals banked against the deepening cold, and in the quiet chamber beyond, a woman waited. For women of the patrician class, the world was narrow, gilded, and cold. Their days measured in prayers and needlework, their nights in silence. The affairs of trade and guild were not theirs to command, yet upon their marriages hung alliances, upon their wombs, dynasties. Lady Margaret sat by a tall escritoire. Before her a folded letter rested, its seal unbroken. A courier had brought it near midnight, pale with cold, eyes downcast. It bore her husband's mark. Yet still she hesitated. The city breathed around her. Soft creaks stirred the beams above. The wind pressed faint fingers against the thick glass. From below, a clock chimed the 2nd hour. At last, with trembling fingers, she broke the seal. The parchment crinkled dry beneath her touch. Words flowed across the page. Careful, spare. A deal struck. A debt honored. A delay in return. No mention of danger. No word of longing. She read the letter twice. 3 times. each word etched deeper upon her heart. Then, with a slow breath, she folded it once more, and the candle beside her burned lower still. For the servants of such houses, the night was long and laden with unseen burdens. In the kitchen's deep stone belly, a lone maid scoured pewter by lamplight, her hands raw from lye, her eyes rimmed red with weariness. The cook had long since gone, the great hearth cold, but the mistress's bell might yet ring, and so the girl worked on, each plate gleaming dull beneath her touch. Above, in the upper chambers, a nursemaid paced slow with a restless child. The babe's cries had stilled, yet the house seemed to listen. Footsteps might echo where none had passed. A latch might stir of its own accord. In such houses, shadows lingered long. For the men of the house, their power reached beyond these walls. Letters sent, coins pledged, weapons bought in secret. Yet here, beneath the tapestries and velvet, their absence spoke loudest. A steward moved through the silent halls. His keys rang soft upon his belt. One by one he checked each door. Strong oak, iron-bound. At the great hall's end he paused. A ledger lay open upon a side table, a single coin beside it, tarnished with age. He closed the book, fingers lingering upon the worn leather. For scribes in service to such houses, the pen carried more weight than sword. In a small scriptorium beneath the east wing, an aged clerk bent low over a fresh sheet. By candlelight he copied the day's accounts, each figure precise, each name deliberate. His quill moved slow, his breath came shallow, and still the ink flowed. Outside, the city lay cloaked in fog. The last of the night watch passed beneath the arched gate. Their torches flickered brief against the stone, then vanished. Within the house, Lady Margaret stood at last. Her footsteps barely stirred the thick carpet. At the escritoire, she sealed the letter once more, hands steady now. She placed it within the carved coffer, then turned to the window, gaze lost to the unseen streets below. And beneath worn velvet, the keys sang faintly once more. Beneath the soaring vaults of the cathedral, beyond doors iron-bound and heavy with age, lay the scriptorium, a place of ink and silence, of vellum and shadow. Here the written word held dominion. Stone steps wound downward into cool gloom. The air smelled of old wax, of dry parchment, of dust untouched by sunlight. Candles burned low in iron sconces, small islands of warmth in the vast hush. For scribes, this was a world apart, beyond the reach of guild and market, of watchman and street cry. Here time unfurled in the slow rhythm of the quill, each letter a breath, each word a weight. Brother Lucas moved softly between the tall shelves, scrolls bound in cracked leather, tomes chained to iron bars. Their spines whispered of forgotten knowledge, of laws centuries old, of names long unspoken. At a narrow desk near the room's heart, he settled once more. The parchment before him gleamed faintly in the dim light, a missive from the bishop's court, to be copied thrice before dawn. Its script was dense, the meaning layered deep. He dipped his quill with care. The ink, thick, black as midnight. Each stroke demanded precision. A slip could twist meaning, invite wrath. And so, breath steady, he began. Beyond the scriptorium, the great library waited, a labyrinth of stone and wood. Its shelves climbed high into darkness. Narrow ladders leaned against ancient beams. Ropes hung slack, their bells long silent. For the women who served here, their roles were few. Yet some found place as caretakers, as binders, as keepers of keys. Anna moved through the outer hall with practiced grace. A tray balanced upon her hip, wax for seals, sand for drying ink, a small flask of wine. Her eyes lingered upon the shelves as she passed. Not all books were meant for her gaze, yet she watched and learned. At a side alcove she paused. A small folio lay open upon a stand, its script delicate, edged in gold. She traced the air above its page, lips moving silent. Then with a glance moved on. For merchants of rare books, the library was both treasure and snare. A single charter, a forgotten lineage, such things could shift fortunes. But access came dear, and whispers of forged texts carried sharp price. In a cold chamber beyond the main hall, two men spoke low. A merchant of parchment, a clerk of the chapter. Between them, a sealed scroll, its ribbon faded red. "You are certain?" the merchant asked. The clerk's eyes flicked to the shadows. "As certain as need be." Coins passed swift, hands clasped brief, and the scroll vanished beneath the merchant's cloak. For soldiers called to guard such places, the duty was dull, yet laden with unseen weight. Few thieves dared these halls, but secrets moved here, veiled in script. At the library's great door, a young guard shifted upon his post. His halberd leaned against the wall, cold beneath his touch. He watched the stair with careful gaze. Each figure noted, each parchment tracked. The hours dragged slow. The only sound, the faint rustle of turning pages, the distant echo of a scribe's cough. For Brother Lucas, the night deepened. His hand moved steady across the page. Ink flowed. Words took shape. Outside, the bells marked the 3rd hour. Their tone drifted soft through stone and air. He paused, quill raised, breath long and slow. A figure moved beyond the arch, Anna bearing fresh sand. Their eyes met, a nod passed. Then she was gone, her steps fading into shadow. Alone once more, Lucas bent low. The candle's flame trembled. His quill resumed its dance, and beneath the ancient beams, dust swirled faintly still. Before the bells marked the dawn, the city stirred, not in haste, not in clamor, but with the slow, breathing rhythm of stone and life. The fog lay heavy still, draped across rooftops, coiling through narrow lanes. Moisture beaded upon leaded glass, upon wrought iron rail, upon the rough faces of ancient walls. Beneath it all, the streets lay slick, each worn cobble glistening faintly in the dim light. In the baker's quarter near the old east gate, the first shutters creaked open. A soft thud, sack of flour set upon stone, a rasping breath, bellows drawn deep. Then, the low murmur of flame meeting wood, for the bakers. The day began long before sun. Within arched ovens, fires leapt high, their breath hot against cool brick. Pale dough rested beneath rough linen, waiting, and beneath the watchful eye of the master, the work began. Master Alaric moved with slow purpose, hands dusted in flour, eyes sharp despite the hour, each loaf shaped with care, each cut traced with practiced hand. Beside him, his son worked in silence. The boy's movements lacked the grace of age, but the will remained. Together they labored beneath the glow of coals, beneath beams dark with years. For women of the market, the hour was precious. Before the guildsmen rose, before the square filled with coin and voice, they moved swift through the streets, baskets upon hips, scarves drawn against the chill, eyes keen for fresh fare. At the well near the old cloister, a small line formed. Pails scraped stone, water splashed cold upon raw hands. Margaret drew her bucket slow, breath rising in faint clouds. At her side her daughter waited, thin, pale, wrapped tight in a patched shawl. Their day would be long, coins few. But for now the water was life. For merchants, the dawn was calculation. Beneath thick wool cloaks, ledgers were opened, tallies marked anew. In a narrow counting room above the fish market, Herr Dietrich rubbed sleep from tired eyes. Before him, a parchment lay heavy with ink. Debts, promises, risk. He sipped thin wine, bitter on the tongue. The bells had not yet rung, but already the game had begun. Below, the first carts rattled slow along slick streets. Salt, grain, cloth bound for distant trade. For soldiers of the watch, the dawn was release. Through damp barracks and along quiet towers, the night shift yielded ground. Boots heavy with wear, voices low, breath long. At the iron gate, 2 guards leaned beneath the arch, their forms blurred by fog. One yawned, knuckles pressed against cold cheek. The other watched the lane beyond, empty still. Soon the gate would open, the city would stir, and the weight of the night would fade. For scribes, the early hour brought clarity. In the cathedral's upper chamber, Brother Lucas stood before tall windows, their glass blurred with mist, edges rimed with frost. Quill in hand, he marked the hour upon a small vellum strip. A ritual, a reckoning. Below, the square remained cloaked in shadow, yet faint footsteps echoed now. Merchants crossing early, cloaked figures hastening through the cold, for the old and the lost. The dawn was both mercy and reminder. Beneath a stone arch near the old synagogue, an aged man stirred from restless sleep. His blanket, thin, threadbare, his bones, colder still. He watched as light seeped slow through fog, each breath shallow, each moment a gift. The bells rang then, deep, sonorous, folding through the city's heart. 1, 2, 3. Windows creaked open. Smoke rose thin from chimneys. And beneath the waking stone, life pressed forward once more. And through the unseen cracks, salt whispered faintly still. As the first pale light filtered through the thick morning fog, the city awoke in layers. Above the stone lanes, shutters creaked open one by one. Hands leaned upon cold frames. Eyes peered into the gray. The air hung heavy with damp, touched faintly by wood smoke and the salt tang of distant trade. In the marketplace near the Domplatz, the first wagons rattled slow across uneven stones. Their iron-rimmed wheels groaned with the weight of goods, grain, cloth, bitter herbs. A lone bell rang from the belfry above, its tone swallowed by the fog. For the merchants of the open market, the hour was fleeting. By midday, the square would thrum with bodies. Coins would flash. Words would rise and fall. But now, in this quiet moment, there was space to breathe. At the far edge of the square, Greta laid out coarse linens upon a rough plank table. Fingers stiff from cold, she folded each piece with care. Neat stacks, threadbare yet clean. Her husband bent beneath the cart, drawing crates into place. Their wares were humble, their hope fragile. For women of the lower quarter, the market was necessity. Bundles of eggs carried beneath worn shawls, clutches of winter greens drawn from narrow garden plots. Each coin mattered, each trade, a measure against hunger. Near the well, an old woman bartered softly with a fishmonger, her voice low, eyes wary. The fish gleamed dull upon cracked ice, river catch from the night's slow netting. Coins changed hands. A single fish wrapped in rough paper. She tucked it close, vanishing into the fog. For the children of the street, the market was a world of sound and scent. Thin fingers darted unseen beneath laden stalls. A bruised apple here, a crust of bread there. Laughter rose once, then was swallowed by the rising clamor. At the corner of the spice seller's stand, a boy crouched low, eyes wide. The air here was thick with cinnamon, pepper, the sharp bite of clove. Beyond reach, treasures. But one misstep. He waited, watched, then slipped away. For the merchants of wealth, the market was theater, a place to be seen, to command. Tall cloaks swept damp stones. Gloved hands gestured with slow precision. Their voices cut through the fog, measured, sure. Herr Marcus strode beneath the arches with deliberate pace. A retinue followed, 2 clerks, a single guard. He paused at the moneylender's stall, exchanging quiet words. Silver gleamed between palms. A ledger was marked. A nod sealed the exchange. For scribes, the market brought new script. Not all transactions flowed in coin. Contracts whispered beneath breath. Debts recorded in fine hand. Brother Lucas moved through the crowd, eyes sharp. Parchment tucked beneath his cloak, quill case at his belt. A merchant beckoned him aside. Words passed swift, a note inscribed, a seal pressed. And so the record grew, beneath the bustle, beneath the sound. For peasants come from the outer villages, the market was both hope and trial. Tolls paid at the gate. Long hours walked beneath laden carts. Now, the chance to trade. A farmer stood beside his small cart, hands rough upon the worn wood. Turnips, leeks, a single bundle of dried herbs. The crowd swirled around him. Few paused, fewer bought. Still he waited. Above it all, the fog began to lift, thin shafts of light piercing the gloom. Shadows stretched long across worn stone. Voices rose. Coins rang faint upon the air. And beneath the market's hum, through the cracks of stone and story, soft footsteps echoed still. Beyond the clang of coin and the sharp cries of the market, the city folded inward. Narrow lanes wound deep between leaning stone walls, their cobbles slick beneath morning mist, their air cool and still. In these shadowed corridors life moved slower, quieter, measured not in gold but in debt, in oath, in silent glance. For the moneylenders and scribes of this place, the hour was constant. Sun or fog mattered little. Their trade thrived beneath the stone, beneath the breath of old beams. At the far end of the Schuldergasse, an iron-studded door swung open. A clerk emerged, ledger clasped tight to his chest. Eyes down, step swift. Within the hall beyond, candles burned low along a narrow desk. Behind it sat Master Ricard, thin, pale, fingers stained with ink. Before him, 3 ledgers, 2 folded letters, a single coin. Clients would come, clients would beg, and the records would grow. For the poor who dared this place, the weight was crushing. A day's labor for a month's debt, a missed payment for a name struck from favor. At the door, a woman stood clutching a cloth-wrapped bundle, eyes hollow, voice low. The clerk beckoned her forward. A short exchange, a single signature, and she was gone, her bundle lighter than before. For merchants entangled in old bargains, the street offered little solace. Past debts whispered through the fog. A rival's ledger might surface at any time. Herr Dietrich moved swift along the lane, cloak drawn close. At his belt, a sealed letter, heavy with intent. Behind him, shadows flickered. Was it footstep or fear? At the moneylender's door he paused, a deep breath drawn. Then he entered, words already shaped upon his tongue. For soldiers tasked with guarding this place, the duty was fraught, not for fear of theft, but for fear of the records kept within. At the corner post, a young guard leaned against cold stone, eyes scanning each passerby, each face marked, each movement weighed. A thin cough drew his gaze. An old man hunched beneath a patched cloak. The guard's grip tightened upon his spear. Yet the man passed slow, unnoticed. For scribes in service here, each line carried risk. A name copied in error could cost a life. A wrong sum, a vanished mark, ruin. In a dim alcove, Brother Lucas bent once more to the ledger. His quill moved steady, his breath shallow. Before him, a list of names newly entered. Beside each, a mark, paid or owing. A stroke too swift could shift the balance. He paused, fingers cold. The candle flickered. Then, ink flowed anew. For the lost and the desperate. The lane was a maze without end. A boy crouched near a broken arch, eyes following each figure. His stomach ached, empty since dawn. Yet no hand offered coin. He waited, watched, and in time slipped away unseen. Above, the fog thinned. A pale shaft of light caught upon old iron. Dust danced slow within its glow. Below, the records deepened. The debt swelled. And through the stone, through the worn ledgers and weary hands, silence gathered still. And beneath the nave, a forgotten light flickered alone. Beyond the narrow lanes of debt and oath, another world unfolded. One woven of thread, of gold, of velvet and bone. A world where wealth moved silent, shaped by unseen hands. Where beauty masked labor, and silence guarded its secrets. In the heart of the clothmaker's quarter, the great halls stirred. Behind tall arched windows, candles flickered to life. Their glow cast soft halos upon carved beams. And in the shadowed workshops below, the day began. For the master weavers and goldsmiths, time held its own measure. A single thread drawn slow, a single clasp forged in patience, each piece a promise, each flaw a stain. Within a high chamber hung with faded tapestries, Master Anton knelt before his loom, fingers steady, breath slow. Before him a swath of deep crimson silk stretched taut. Upon it threads of gold traced delicate patterns, a commission bound for a noble house. Each pass of the shuttle sang soft against the warp. Each line of gold anchored in skill passed through generations. And in the stillness of that chamber, the loom breathed with its master. For the women of these trades, their labor remained unseen. Behind drawn curtains, beneath gilt banners, they stitched life into fabric. Needles flashed in dim light, fingers bled upon fine lace. In a narrow room above the dyer's hall, Elise bent low over a gown of midnight blue. Its hem shimmered faint beneath her touch, each bead placed with care, each seam whispered with stories unspoken. Her pay would be slight, her work unpraised, yet her stitches would grace the halls of power, and her name would fade with the thread. For the apprentices, each day was test and lesson, a misplaced cut, a flawed weld. Mistakes held weight. In the goldsmith's forge beneath the Rosenstrasse, young Yannick polished a slender clasp. Its surface gleamed pale in the lamplight. Beside him the master watched, eyes sharp beneath heavy brow. Again, the voice came soft. And so the boy worked on, breath steady, sweat cold upon his neck. For the merchants of such wares, the trade was peril and prize. A bolt of rare cloth might win favor. A single gem might turn a treaty. In a shadowed alcove of the merchant's hall, Herr Marcus conferred with a foreign envoy. Between them lay a velvet pouch, its drawstring loosed with care. Within, a circlet of gold, small, perfect. Words passed low, glances weighed each phrase. Then, a nod. The pouch vanished once more. For scribes tasked with sealing such bargains, the quill carried sharp edge. A single clause could bind a house, a missing word, unmake a fortune. Brother Lucas sat within a side chamber, parchment spread wide, ink fresh, seal prepared. Beside him the merchant leaned close, voice a whisper. Each phrase traced slow, each line marked in care. At last the wax flowed. The seal pressed firm, and the bargain passed into stone. Beyond these halls, beneath the weight of silk and gold, the city breathed as before. Stone damp beneath weary feet, hands rough upon worn coin, the cloth rich, the hunger deeper. In a darkened doorway near the square, a child watched as velvet swept past, eyes wide, stomach hollow. No hand reached down, no glance fell kind, and across the cold beams, shadows gathered in silence. The bells tolled slow beneath a silvered sky, their notes folded through the waking city, deep and hollow. Each strike marked the hour, each echo drawn long across damp stone. At the great cathedral near the heart of the old quarter, shadows gathered beneath towering arches, their carved faces worn by centuries of breath and prayer, their mouths silent, their eyes unblinking. Within, the air hung cold, touched faintly by incense and old wax. Stone pillars soared into darkness, candles flickered in iron rings, their flames trembling against unseen drafts. For the faithful, the hour called them forth. Boots scraped upon worn thresholds, hands pressed to chilled wood. One by one, figures crossed beneath the great nave, cloaks drawn tight, heads bowed. For women of the lower quarter, the church offered thin refuge, a place to kneel unseen, to whisper hope into the silence. Near the fourth pillar, Marta knelt alone, her shawl threadbare against the stone. Her basket lay empty beside her, save for a single folded cloth. She traced the air before her breast, breath shallow. Her eyes lifted once, to light filtering through fractured glass, then lowered once more, for merchants and nobles. The cathedral held other meaning, a theater of piety, a place to be seen beneath banners of faith. At the side aisle, Herr Albrecht moved with deliberate grace. His cloak gleamed dark with fine thread. A single ring caught the morning light. Servants followed at distance, eyes down. At the altar rail he paused. A bow measured, a coin pressed into the alms dish, its sound muted against worn wood. Then, with slow breath, he rose once more. For the priests. The dawn service began with weight, vestments layered thick, gold upon linen, wool beneath silk. Each fold carried care, each thread marked with silent oath. Father Matthias stood within the sacristy, hands steady. Acolytes moved about him, their voices low. Candles were trimmed, wine prepared, the missal laid upon cold stone. For the scribes of the chapter, the service drew fresh ink, decrees read aloud, petitions noted in careful script. Brother Lucas stood at the lectern, scroll unrolled beneath his touch. His voice rose, measured, calm, words traced through the nave, folding against stone. For the sick, for the poor, for those in debt and despair. Each line echoed faint, then fell. For soldiers tasked with the watch, the cathedral's shadow pressed long. They stood beneath the western arch, halberds in hand. Their gazes swept slow across gathered faces. A figure moved near the rear, thin, cloaked deep in gray. One guard tensed, then eased. The figure knelt, and the moment passed. For children of the street, the cathedral held wonder and fear. A world of shadowed stone, of voices raised in song, of gold glimpsed high beyond reach. In the side aisle, a small boy crouched near the candlestand. Eyes wide, fingers curled about his knees. He watched the acolytes pass, robes whispering soft upon the floor. Watched the priest lift chalice to trembling flame. Then, unseen, he slipped away, breath held, heart racing. Above it all, light seeped slow through fractured glass. Red and gold danced upon pale stone. Dust swirled faint in the beams. The final blessing rose, words drawn long. Figures stirred. Coins rang soft in alms bowls. Footsteps echoed beneath the vault, and as the great doors creaked wide once more, cold air pressed inward, the city's breath returned, and through forgotten corridors, soft footsteps echoed. As the morning light strengthened, the city stirred into fuller life. Shutters unlatched with faint groans. Wooden signs swayed upon rusted hinges. Footsteps quickened upon worn stone. Through the fog, now thinning, figures moved swift beneath tall facades. Merchants to their stalls, clerks to their halls, children weaving unseen between broad cloaks and heavy boots. Yet above the bustle, another rhythm threaded through the streets, the slow pulse of messages carried, words sealed in wax, news shaped by ink and hand, for the couriers of the empire. The day began with haste. At the house of post near the main square, horses steamed beneath heavy blankets. Leather satchels hung from high saddles. Inside, a narrow chamber rang with muted voices. Hans, a young rider, knelt before the dispatch master. Parchment passed swift between them, a list of names, a map traced in fine hand. "Southward," the master spoke. "No delays." Hans rose, breath drawn deep. The road would be long, the tolls many, but the message must reach its mark. For the scribes of the city, the flow of letters shaped their days. In dim chambers behind the chancellor's court, quills scratched steady against vellum. Decrees, summons, petitions wrapped in folded grace. Brother Lucas bent once more to his work. Before him, a sealed letter marked urgent, its edges faintly smudged with haste. He read, eyes narrowing. A noble's claim, a debt disputed. The ink flowed anew. Outside, the bells marked the hour, 4 notes, each fading slow through the air. For merchants, the arrival of news carried both promise and peril. A single courier's step might lift a house or cast it low. In the counting room above the Goldgasse, Herr Albrecht paced beneath heavy beams. His gaze flicked often to the door. A letter was due, a ship's fate unknown. At last, footsteps upon stone. A knock, a folded parchment faintly creased. His fingers broke the seal with practiced care. Eyes swept the page. A pause. Then breath released, slow, controlled. For the guards at the gates, each rider brought questions. A seal might grant passage, or invite doubt. At the iron gate, 2 sentries stood beneath a pale banner. A lone courier approached, horse lathered, eyes sharp. The guard's hand rose. "Your mark?" Leather creaked. A scroll unrolled. A nod passed. Gate unbarred. The rider vanished into the city's breath. For women awaiting news, each hour stretched long. Behind drawn curtains, letters were read and read again. Each word weighed, each absence feared. In a tall chamber hung with faded brocade, Lady Margaret traced the edge of a sealed letter. Its wax cool beneath her touch. The words within, sparse, distant. She read them thrice, a 4th time. Beyond the glass, the city hummed with unseen stories. Yet here, within the hush, only silence remained. For the unseen couriers of rumor, no seal sufficed. Tongues wagged swift within alehouse shadow. In a smoke-thick room beneath the old inn, men spoke low of border skirmish and noble feud. Each tale shaped in grainy voice, each ear bent eager. A coin passed, a nod exchanged, and through the streets beyond, the whispers spread. Above it all, the sun fought slow against lingering cloud. Light traced faint upon high stone. Banners stirred upon aged walls. And beneath the worn flags, through the veins of the waking city, messages wove their quiet thread. And through the unseen cracks, salt whispered faintly still. Above the hum of the market and the restless lanes, the great council hall stood aloof. Its spires pierced the pale sky. Its windows stared blank across the city, stone heavy with age, iron cold beneath gilded seal. Within, the air hung still, a vast chamber veiled in shadow, tapestries dulled by smoke and time, banners stiff upon carved beams. Here power moved slow, silent beneath the rustle of velvet, measured beneath the ring of keys upon worn leather belts. For the councilmen, the hour called them forth. Footsteps echoed through long stone corridors, voices hushed behind tall doors. Master Reinhardt stood before the great oaken portal. A steward bowed low, key drawn from ancient chain. The lock turned with a soft groan, iron against iron. Then, the door swung wide. Within, the council gathered. Figures cloaked in deep blue and crimson, faces drawn with age and craft. For merchants of the higher guilds, a seat here was prize beyond coin. Influence whispered in the turn of a phrase, fortunes shaped by the tilt of a brow. Herr Albrecht entered with measured step. His gaze swept the chamber, noting each presence, each absence. At the long table he took his place, fingers light upon polished wood. For the scribes of the council, each word bore weight. Behind a slender desk, Brother Lucas prepared his quill. Ink fresh, parchment spread smooth. The steward spoke, a litany of matters. Petitions, levies, borders marked anew. Each phrase traced in swift, deliberate hand. For the guards of the hall, the duty was solemn. 2 figures stood flanking the high door, halberds gleaming dull beneath vaulted stone, eyes forward, breath slow. Through the hours they watched, each motion noted, each glance measured. For the lesser voices summoned this day, the chamber was no friend. A tradesman from the outer district knelt upon cold stone, his petition, a plea for fair toll. His words trembled beneath the vaulted hush. The council heard, faces unmoved, a decree spoken, brief and final. He rose with shaking hands, bowed low, and withdrew. For the women who served here, the council's will passed through unseen hands. In the chamber beyond, Anna prepared fresh ink, warmed wax, a single knife for sealing. Her ears caught faint words beyond the door. A name spoken thrice, a laugh dry as parchment, then silence once more. She moved with care. No gesture wasted, no glance lingered. Above, the bells tolled the hour, 6 notes drawn long, folding through the high vault. The council stirred. Voices rose, deliberate, soft. Decisions shaped in the play of gaze and breath. Seals pressed, scrolls bound. Gold weighed against favor. And beneath the gleam of banners, shadows lengthened once more. As the hall emptied, Brother Lucas gathered the day's record. Parchment cool beneath his fingers, each word a stone in the city's unseen foundation. He paused, gaze upon the high seat now vacant, then turned, footsteps soft upon worn flags. Outside, the wind pressed faint against the heavy door. Keys rang once, the lock turned slow, and through forgotten corridors, soft footsteps echoed. As the sun bent low behind the jagged rooftops, the city softened once more. Shadows stretched long across worn stone. Smoke rose in slow spirals from narrow chimneys. The air thickened, rich with wood smoke, faint with damp. In the lower quarters, life unfolded with measured pace. Not the clang of coin nor the murmur of counsel, but the quiet rituals of making and mending. A different kind of work, a different kind of rhythm. Along the narrow alley of the Weaver's Row, voices drifted beneath low eaves. Worn garments hung from sagging lines, their edges stiff with the cold. Water dripped slow from rough wool and coarse linen. Each drop marked the stone below. For women of the crafts, the evening brought steady labor, baskets of thread untangled, seams patched beneath thin lamplight. In a cramped chamber above the dyer's yard, Marta bent low over a frayed tunic. Her needle traced tired lines, breath soft upon the cloth. A kettle simmered faint nearby, broth thin but warming. Outside, her youngest daughter gathered wood from the narrow lane, fingers red with cold, eyes sharp for stray splinters. For the apprentices of the lower guilds, the hour held small freedoms. Tools wiped clean, benches swept, a stolen moment to rest. In the cooper's yard, young Otto crouched beside a cooling barrel. His palms traced the smooth curve, eyes weary but proud. Beside him, the journeyman spoke low, a word of praise, a caution, a promise of harder days to come. For the bakers. The ovens dimmed, but hands remained busy. Loaves wrapped in rough cloth, crumbs swept from stone. Master Alaric wiped sweat from his brow, gaze lingering upon the last of the day's bread. Outside, the first of the night's poor would gather, a few coins spent, a few crusts taken in hope, for merchants of humbler trade. Ledgers closed beneath trembling fingers, tallies short, debts tall. In a narrow shop near the iron bridge, Greta counted coin beneath flickering light. Her husband watched from the doorway, shoulders heavy, breath slow. Tomorrow's trade uncertain, tonight's meal thin, for the scribes who served below the halls of power. The day's ink gave way to other tasks. Seals checked, locks turned, parchment pressed beneath iron weight. Brother Lucas moved through the archives chill. Fingers brushed worn spines. A single letter retrieved, its script faint with age. He read once, twice, then returned it to the dark. For the children of the stone. The streets beckoned, shadows long and inviting, voices low, laughter rare. Beneath the worn arch of the old mill, a small group huddled, thin limbs wrapped in patched cloth. A game of stones played upon damp ground, no prizes given, no lessons kept, but the moment, theirs. As the bells tolled the evening hour, windows shuttered one by one, lamps kindled behind oiled glass. Figures moved slow beneath the fogged streets, baskets in hand, weary feet upon cold stone. Above, banners hung limp in the still air, their colors faded, their cloth worn, and beneath the breath of the sleeping city, beneath its stone and shadow, life pressed onward still, and beneath worn velvet the keys sang faintly once more. As twilight deepened, the city's breath slowed. Shadows swelled between crooked buildings. The last faint light of day faded behind cloud and slate, and one by one the lamps were lit. In the upper quarter, tall windows kindled soft glow. Candles guttered behind leaded glass. Their flicker cast long fingers across stone courtyards and silent halls. Along the narrow lanes, oil lamps swayed from wrought iron arms. Their light pooled in small circles upon damp cobbles. Beyond their reach, darkness gathered thick and sure. For the craftsmen of the city, the night held further labor. Orders unfinished, commissions due. A quiet hour beneath stone and flame. Within the workshop of Master Anselm, gold gleamed beneath a single lamp. Thin wires twisted slow beneath calloused fingers. A clasp shaped for a noble's cloak, its form drawn from old design, its purpose yet unworn. Anselm's breath came even. The room about him lay hushed, save for the soft rasp of file upon metal. In the corner a coffer stood half-filled with sealed work. Another long night awaited. For the weavers, thread still moved through loom, a tapestry half-formed beneath patient hands. Elise sat alone in the high chamber. Her shuttle passed slow beneath the taut warp, crimson and gold, emerald and ash. Outside, bells tolled the late hour, soft, distant. She worked on, each pass of thread a small defiance against time's pull. For the couriers, The final messages must yet be borne. In the cold yard of the post house, Hans stood by his mount, breath misted in the chill air, a folded letter pressed firm beneath his belt. The gatekeeper's nod came swift, no words exchanged, saddle secured, boot to stirrup, and then hooves struck stone. A pale shadow vanished into the deepening dark. For scribes of the unseen hand, records must be sealed before dawn. Within the chapter's archive, Brother Lucas traced one last line upon vellum. His quill whispered against the grain. A name, a mark, a date. He paused. Ink pooled slow at the quill's tip. A breath drawn deep. Then, the seal was pressed. Wax cooled. The scroll bound. For merchants of the upper guilds, the night brought counsel. In a tall room hung with faded maps, Herr Albrecht conferred by faint lamplight. Figures bent low above polished table. Gold counted. Ships named. Risks weighed in hush. At the chamber's edge, Anna refilled the goblets. Her hands moved sure, her eyes down. But each word marked, each name held. For the poor of the outer quarter, warmth was rare. A single lamp lit the darkened alcove where Marta sat with her children. Broth stirred faint upon the hearth. Cloth mended beneath weary fingers. The walls about them breathed cold. Yet within that small circle of light, life held. As the bells rang once more, their tone deep and hollow, the city leaned into night. Footsteps slowed, doors barred, shutters drawn, and across the winding streets, from spire to square, the lamps burned low. Their flames wavered against the pressing dark, their glow a thin thread through the breath of stone, and beneath the nave, a forgotten light flickered alone. The deep of night held the city close, its breath slow, its stones heavy with stillness. The bells had long ceased, their echoes faded beneath cold archways. In the narrow lanes the fog thickened once more, soft fingers brushing ancient walls. Above the stars lay veiled in cloud. A pale sliver of moon traced faint upon slate roofs. Its light caught upon iron grates, upon shuttered glass, upon banners limp and wet with dew. For the watchmen of the city, the hour belonged to shadow. Their steps slow, deliberate, eyes sharp beneath helm and cloak. At the southern gate, two figures moved beneath the arch. Halberds held low, boots muffled against damp stone. One paused. A faint sound drifted through the fog, metal upon metal soft as breath. No threat, not this night, but they listened all the same. For the scribes who remained, the quill now rested. Ink cooled within glass. Pages lay beneath smooth stone, their words sealed in wax and weight. In the high chamber of the archive, Brother Lucas sat alone. His gaze lifted from the darkened desk to the narrow window beyond. Mist pressed faint against the glass. A single candle guttered beside him. He did not write, not now. Some hours called only for silence, for the merchants of power. The halls had emptied, coins locked within coffer, parchments bound and stowed. Yet one light remained within the great hall of trade. Herr Albrecht stood before the high window, hands clasped behind his back. Below, the square lay empty. Beyond, the river whispered beneath its stone span. A letter waited upon his desk, unsealed, unread. For the women of the great houses, the night brought restless sleep. Within a tall chamber hung with heavy drape, Lady Margaret stirred. The hearth burned low, its embers cast faint glow upon folded cloth. Beside her bed the escritoire remained open. A single quill lay across parchment bare. She rose, silent upon worn rug. At the window, her breath traced slow upon the glass. Below, the city held its breath. She watched and waited. For the lost and the unseen, the night was a time without hour. Within a narrow alcove near the old cloister, an old man huddled close, his cloak thin against the cold, his eyes closed, though sleep did not come. Above, footsteps passed, slow, deliberate, guards or other shadows. He did not rise, not yet. For the children of the street, the fog was friend and cover. Beneath a sagging stare, two boys whispered, coins counted in faint light, plans drawn with hushed breath. The city about them lay vast, its stone cold beneath bare feet. Yet within the dark they carved their own small space for the city itself. The stone breathed deep, archways wept faint with dew. Wood creaked beneath unseen weight, old banners stirred without wind. In a forgotten corridor beneath the council hall, a single lantern swayed, its light traced slow across damp wall. Iron keys hung silent upon hook. The last footsteps faded beyond the far arch, and through forgotten corridors soft footsteps echoed. Long before the bells called the hour, the first breath of dawn stirred beneath the stone. Not yet light, but less than dark. A thin seam of gray pressed along the eastern sky. The city slept, but lightly now. Above slate roofs, the fog began to thin. Its coils drew slow between towers and spires. A faint chill settled along the eaves, beating upon iron and glass. In the lanes below, water pooled in shallow hollows. Stone glistened beneath faint light. No voices rose, no cartwheels rang. Yet the air held a quiet pulse, a sense of turning. For the bakers of the city, the hour was already upon them. In the heart of the quarter, ovens breathed anew. Flames licked brick with slow hunger. Pale dough shaped beneath skilled hands. Master Alaric stood before the long hearth, eyes sharp despite the hour. His son worked beside him, silent but swift. Loaves set in careful rows, ash brushed from worn stone. Their world was scent and heat and patience. Beyond the shop's shuttered windows, the city remained in hush. But soon the steps would come, for the women of the outer lanes. The first light marked the time for water. At the old well near the mill gate, figures moved through lingering mist. Pails creaked upon worn rope. Water splashed cold upon raw hands. Margaret leaned against the well's edge, breath drawn deep. Her daughter waited nearby, shawl drawn tight. Together they watched the sky pale, slow, and reluctant. For the scribes of the chapter, the first ink stirred beneath quill. In the upper chamber of the cathedral, Brother Lucas prepared the day's scrolls. A small lamp burned before him, its light dim against the gray beyond. He dipped the quill with care, each line marked slow, each word traced with deliberate hand. Outside, the bells would soon call the first service. For now, only the whisper of ink upon vellum marked the hour. For the guards of the outer gate, the watch shifted with the light. Two figures stood beneath the high arch, cloaks drawn close. Their eyes traced the pale line upon the horizon. Soon, one murmured. The other nodded, silent. No riders passed, no wagons approached. Yet the city's breath deepened with each moment. For the merchants of the square, the first carts stood ready. Horses stamped beneath thin blanket. Goods bound beneath canvas still damp with dew. Herr Dietrich paced slow beside his wagon. Fingers tapped upon worn leather strap. The market would wake soon. His wares must greet the light. For the unseen poor, the hour brought cold decision. To move, to linger, to hope. Beneath the great arch of the western bridge, an old man stirred from restless sleep. His bones ached with chill, his blanket damp with night's breath. He rose slow, each motion drawn with care. Ahead, the streets waited, wide and uncertain, for the children of the stone. The dawn held its own game. In a narrow stair beneath the old market, a boy crouched beside rough wall. Eyes traced the paling sky beyond. His companions still slept, curled tight in shadow. But he watched and waited, for with light came chance. As the first bell tolled, deep, single, deliberate, the city shifted. Windows unlatched. Smoke rose thin from new-lit hearth. Steps echoed faint upon waking stone. The breath of the city deepened, slow, sure. A new day pressed close, and across the cold beams, shadows gathered in silence. As the city exhaled the weight of night, its stones welcomed the slow return of life. Light seeped thin between high facades. Mist retreated, drawn into narrow lanes. The air held the scent of damp earth, of soot, of distant bread. Step by step, the first feet marked the cobbled streets. Boots echoed beneath archways still dark. Hands unlatched shutters, their creak soft against the stillness. Wood scraped stone as stalls unfolded. The city stirred. For the merchants of the outer stalls, the dawn was no stranger. Their hands moved with practiced rhythm, canvas drawn taut, scales set firm upon battered boards. Greta lifted rough baskets into place, roots and herbs bound in twine. A sack of grain split neat beneath her knife. Its weight fell soft upon the stall. Her breath rose pale against the air. No coin yet passed. But the first gazes would come. For women of the house, the early hour brought purpose. Lists whispered from thin lips, purses checked beneath worn folds. Along the market's edge, Anna paced slow, a basket upon her arm. Eyes sharp for the freshest cloth, the fairest root. She paused before a weaver's stall. Fingers traced rough linen, a word exchanged. Price weighed upon breath. A nod, a coin passed, and the cloth was hers. For the scribes of the city, news moved with the light. A lone courier crossed the square. Leather satchel creaked beneath his step. Brother Lucas awaited at the chancery gate. Scroll received with silent nod. Seal inspected. Mark true. Within, his quill stirred once more. Ink dark as new shadow upon vellum. For the guards of the gate, the morning brought motion. Carts rolled beneath high arch. Wheels groaned against fresh-laid straw. One by one, tolls were marked. Hands reached for coin. Voices exchanged in gruff accord. A wagon passed heavy with timber. Another, with barrels bound for distant inns. The guards watched, silent. Their eyes measured each face, each load. The city must breathe, but never too freely. For the old who rose with the sun, the streets offered quiet place. In the cloistered lane beside the baker's court, an aged man leaned upon worn cane. His gaze traced each stall, each shifting face. No word spoke, none needed. A young boy darted past, breath sharp with laughter. The old man's eyes followed, a faint smile drawn deep within worn lines. For the children of the market, the day began with chase. Between carts and crates they wove unseen, eyes bright, hands swift. Near the fishmonger's stall, two girls crouched low, their gaze fixed upon stray apple fallen beneath laden board. A glance exchanged, a breath held, then swift as thought, the prize in hand. Above it all the bells called second hour, their tone clear beneath brightening sky. The square thrummed now, voices layered in rise and fall. Coin rang sharp against wood and palm. Footsteps folded beneath the city's breath, and through the waking stone, life pressed onward slow and sure. And beneath worn velvet, the keys sang faintly once more. Above the waking square, beyond the hum of barter and voice, the great houses rose in solemn quiet. Stone facades caught the pale light of morning. Windows stared dark upon the streets below. Their eyes shuttered, their mouths closed. Within, the air remained cool. Walls breathed faint with night's damp. Velvet hung heavy upon tall frames. Gold dulled beneath a skin of dust. For the servants of these halls, the day began beneath the weight of silence. Steps counted upon worn stair, locks checked thrice, linen folded with measured breath. Anna moved swift through the lower passage. A tray balanced light upon her palm, a single goblet, a folded letter. A key hung cold against her wrist. Her slippers whispered soft upon flagstone, each turn marked, each glance weighed. Above, the lady had not yet stirred. For the housekeepers, the sun-marked rhythm unseen, curtains drawn wide, shutters unlatched with care. Within the high chamber, Marta pressed cloth to glass. Mist fled beneath her hand. Beyond the pane, the city blurred beneath pale sky. She paused, gaze tracing distant spire, a breath slow, then cloth moved once more. For the stewards of power, the morning's ink held weight. In the study, Master Reinhardt bent low above smooth parchment, quill sharp, seal prepared, names inked with deliberate hand, each stroke a ripple upon the still surface of the house's affairs. A knock came, soft, brief. A page entered, head bowed. A letter delivered. A word exchanged, and beneath the steward's gaze the day's currents deepened. For the women of the upper chambers, life moved behind drawn veil. Lady Margaret sat before her escritoire. A single sheet lay bare beneath her hand. Ink poised, words yet unformed. She traced the quill's tip upon dry air, a line begun, then left adrift. Beyond the heavy drapes, faint voices rose from distant lane. She listened, and the moment stretched long. For the guards of the inner court, the post remained. Two stood beneath carved arch, their armor dulled beneath fine cloak. Halberds upright, eyes forward. Servants passed swift between stair and hall. None lingered, none spoke. The guards watched, stone beneath their feet cold with night's hold. For the scribes bound to the house, each word held shadow. In a small chamber near the library's heart, Brother Lucas traced thin lines upon worn vellum. A ledger of debts, a record of favor. The names marked deep, the sums carved clear. His quill moved slow, breath even, yet beneath each letter, a weight unspoken. For the unseen beneath the stone, life clung quiet. In the servant's stair, an old woman paused upon the worn tread. Her basket hung light upon thin arm. A moment's rest, a breath drawn deep. Above, footsteps crossed distant floor, voices muffled beneath velvet and stone. She listened, then moved on. And through the tall house, through cold hall and shaded stair, the day pressed forward, silent, measured, enduring. And beneath the nave a forgotten light flickered alone. Beneath the stone ribs of the city, beneath the weight of guild and trade, of faith and gold, the earth held deeper breath. A colder pulse, a quieter rhythm, stair wound downward, narrow, worn smooth by countless feet. Air thickened with chill and damp. Walls wept faint with unseen tears. In these vaults, sound moved slow. A whispered step, a clink of chain, a sigh of old wood. For the cellar keepers, the day began in shadow. Their lanterns cast thin circles upon rough stone. Their hands traced iron locks, checked timber banded with rust. Master Jonas moved through the salt vault. A great key turned slow in aged lock. Wood creaked beneath unseen weight. Within, barrels lined in solemn row. Salt from distant mines, wealth pale and bitter. He traced each mark with practiced eye. None must spoil, none must shift. For the women of the lower house, the cellars held labor unseen. In the cool of the wine vault, Marta wiped dust from heavy glass. Her cloth moved soft across faded seal, names of houses long gone. Above, voices stirred faint through layered stone. Here, only breath, only the hush of bottle and cask. She worked slow, each gesture traced in care, each motion marked by patience. For the guards of the deep vault, the post pressed cold. Two figures stood beneath a rusted gate, their breath misted in the still air. Lantern light flickered faint upon mail and blade. They watched, they waited. No step should pass unseen. For the scribes of the store ledgers, ink met stone with wary hand. In a narrow chamber near the vault's mouth, Brother Lucas bent above rough desk. Parchment lay beneath his quill, damp at the edge. Names of goods, weights and sum. He wrote slow, each letter firm against the grain, each line bound in duty. A pause, a breath, then ink moved once more. For the unseen within the stone, the deep held refuge and dread. A figure moved through forgotten stair, hood drawn low, hands rough upon worn rail. No voice called, no eye marked. In the oldest vault, beneath sealed arch, iron-bound chests lay untouched, dust thick upon their lids, chains slack with time. None spoke of these, none lingered near. Yet the air here pressed heavy, as if breath itself had long since ceased. For the merchants of the upper halls, the vault's tally meant wealth unseen. Herr Albrecht's mark passed through steward's hand, a cask counted, a seal checked. Yet he did not descend, not this day. For beneath the stone, beneath the reach of gold, the city whispered to itself. A sigh through ancient beam, a crack beneath damp wall, a slow drip counted in dark. Master Jonas closed the salt vault once more. Iron rang dull against lock, lantern raised. His steps echoed soft through empty hall, and beneath the nave a forgotten light flickered alone. As evening pressed its cool breath once more across the stone, the city gathered in quiet corners, not all in labor, not all in trade, but in voice, in string, in word. Beyond the weight of coin and ledger, beyond the hush of counsel, the taverns stirred to softer rhythm. Lanterns swung low upon carved beams. Smoke wove slow between rafter and cloth. For the poets of the city, the hour called forth their words. Not for coin, though some would pass, but for the shape of sound within the stone. In the narrow hall of the Silver Boar, a small crowd pressed close, benches worn smooth by years of gathering, cups heavy with cheap wine, eyes bright beneath shadowed brow. At the hearth's side a figure rose, a thin man, cloak threadbare but proud. Voice carried low, sure. His words traced tales of river and tower, of love bound in salt and ash, of loss beneath the turning moon. The room held breath. Mugs paused in mid-raise. Even the flames stilled in lean. For the musicians of the night, fingers woke old strings. Melody wound soft through smoke, a song of road and stone. Beside the poet a girl drew bow across worn fiddle. Notes rose, high, clear, then folded deep beneath the beam. Her eyes closed, her breath stilled. Sound moved through the gathered, a thread drawn taut between heart and hand. For the merchants come in shadow, such halls offered refuge, a place to mark who sat with whom, who smiled, who frowned. Herr Marcus leaned beneath the far eave, goblet untouched, eyes sharp. Across the room a rival laughed too loud, a gesture too bold. Marcus watched, a nod given, a word to follow come dawn. For the women of the lower lanes, the songs wove memory. Hands rough with labor eased in time to string and word. Marta sat near the hearth, her youngest upon her knee. eyes wide with wonder at tale and tune. The child's breath matched the fiddle's fall, head rested soft against faded shawl. For the scribes weary of ink, such hours offered balm. Brother Lucas stood within the arch, robes plain, hands clasped light. No parchment now, no quill, only ear and eye. A verse caught soft in thought, a line traced faint within the mind. For the unseen beneath the stone, even breath found place here. An old man crouched near the stair, no cup, no coin, yet no hand moved him on. He watched, he listened, and the stone held all. As the final verse fell, soft, drawn long, the room breathed deep once more. Mugs raised, coins passed with murmur, lamps trimmed anew. Yet the air held echo still, and through forgotten corridors soft footsteps echoed. Night had folded its full weight upon the city once more. Above the market's empty square, banners hung still. Stone gleamed dark beneath thin sheen of mist, and the narrow lanes of the lower quarter breathed slow in shadow. Beyond the last of the taverns, where song gave way to hush, the streets grew tighter. Their corners held no flame. Their thresholds stayed closed, yet life lingered still. For in the quarter of the dyers and cobblers the night ran long. Work pressed beyond sun's fall, and coin moved soft beneath shuttered gaze. Within a low building framed in timber worn pale, Marta bent over steaming vat. The dye seeped deep into coarse cloth, its scent sharp in the cool air. Her fingers moved without pause, though her shoulders ached with the weight of the day. Outside, footsteps passed, quick, deliberate. A figure in gray cloak slipped between the shadows, no sound but breath upon the cold. For the men of the outer wards. The dark brought quiet trade. Baskets exchanged behind thin door. Messages passed with glance alone. In a narrow shop pressed deep beneath leaning wall, Herr Anselm checked his scales by lantern light. A pouch of spice, its worth more than its weight. A folded slip of parchment placed with care. The door thudded soft. The next shadow entered. For the guards of these lanes, duty wore thin. Two watched beneath rusted arch, their eyes ringed with wear. Their halberds leaned close, hands wrapped tight against cold. They marked each figure, each glance. Yet few words passed, and fewer deeds were drawn. For the scribes tasked with watching unseen. The dark brought ink yet to dry. Brother Lucas sat in cramped alcove near the council's outpost. A list before him, names gathered from whisper and eye. He traced each line with careful hand, a pause between each mark. Outside, the city breathed deep in its sleep. But within these walls record held fast. For the women behind closed doors, the hour wore heavy. In a chamber above the joiner's lane, Elise stitched by lamp's flicker. Fine thread drew pattern upon velvet deep. A commission for a house unseen. Its coin would feed her for weeks. Her needle passed through cloth with slow rhythm. Outside her window, a single key turned soft in distant lock. She did not rise, she did not look. For the lost of the stone, the dark offered thin refuge. Beneath crumbling stair near the fishmonger's lane, an old man drew cloak tight about thin frame. A crust of bread clutched close, breath shallow. Footsteps neared, then passed. A gutter dripped faint beside him. Each drop marked a moment endured. And through the unseen cracks, salt whispered faintly still. Beyond the last hour's bell, the city held to its breath. Streets ran empty beneath cold stone. Lamps flickered weak against the dark, their glow lost within thickening mist. The bells had tolled once more, low drawn, final. Their sound rolled through hollow lanes, each note folding against shuttered wall and locked gate. Above, the stars remained veiled. The moon hung thin. a shard of pale light caught upon slate, its gleam traced faint across iron grates, across banners stiff with frost. For the guards upon the outer gate, the night stretched long. 2 stood beneath high arch. Their cloaks hung heavy, damp with breath of stone. Eyes watched each darkened lane, each hollow sound. A traveler approached, lone figure beneath sagging hood, boots marked faint upon wet stone. "Name," one guard spoke, voice rough with cold. A token passed, worn, marked. A pause, a nod, and the gate's small door swung slow. For the scribes still at their post, ink met parchment in final line. Within the chamber of record, Brother Lucas traced closing hand upon vellum. A single scroll bound with care, wax sealed with trembling light. His gaze lingered upon the script, names of those who passed unseen, of words exchanged in hush. The candle guttered low beside him. He watched the flame fold slow upon itself. For the merchants whose halls remained lit, the night's last counsel whispered beneath beam. In a high room veiled in smoke, Herr Albrecht leaned close across worn map. Figures traced upon thin sheet, roots, debts, promise. At his side a clerk marked each word, quill steady. Yet beyond the chamber's edge the hour pressed thin. A glance to shuttered window, a breath drawn deep. Soon, enough. For the women whose work ran through the dark, needle still met cloth. Elise sat within her loft, lamp near spent. Thread passed through silk drawn tight. A cloak of deep blue, stars sewn in pale stitch. Her hands moved slow, each pull marked in hush, each knot drawn sure. Below her window, a lone step crossed the lane. She did not pause. She did not look. For the unseen of the city, the night held space. Beneath the arch near the outer wall, an old man crouched within cloak thin as breath, eyes closed, body curled near stone. Footsteps passed, soft, unhurried. A cloak swayed near the edge of sight. No hand reached, no word spoke. For the children of the stone, the hour held no fear, no end. Within a hollow near the fishmonger's stair, a boy traced patterns upon damp wall, fingers pale, eyes wide. His companions slept beneath ragged cloth, yet he watched the lane, and in that watching, the city breathed. As the bells marked final note, the sound folded into stone, a hush deeper than dark, a breath held beneath worn timber. And through forgotten corridors, soft footsteps echoed. Beneath the weight of midnight, the city held to silence. Its stones breathed slow, its walls pressed cold. Above, the stars lay veiled, the moon dimmed beneath thick cloud. And within the heart of the old quarter, the great cathedral stood wrapped in shadow. Its towers rose dark against the sky, its bells silent, its doors sealed. But beneath, within stone older than song, life stirred faint. For beneath the nave, the crypts breathed still. Stairs wound narrow beneath worn arch, air pressed thick with chill. Each step rang soft upon hollow tread. Lanterns flickered within recess deep. Their light caught upon iron and bone, upon dust and script worn thin by time. For the keepers of these vaults, the hour bore no change. Their vigil held through dusk and dawn. Brother Lucas moved slow through corridor damp, a scroll in hand. A key hung cold upon chain. At the sealed arch he paused, a breath drawn deep. Lock turned with weary groan. Beyond, shelves rose high, their burden old and unseen. He crossed with care. Footsteps hushed beneath vaulted stone. For the acolytes assigned to this place, each night traced same path. 2 figures passed between carved tombs, torches steady in hand, eyes forward, their words held soft, a prayer beneath breath, a glance to stone marked in forgotten tongue. For the guards of the upper nave, The dark pressed close. At the western door 2 stood in shadow, their spears upright, their cloaks damp with unseen mist, each echo traced from distant stare, each flicker of light marked in thought, yet no sound called, no step rose. For the women who tended unseen, the hour bore other tasks. In chamber narrow beyond transept deep, Anna prepared fresh cloth, linen folded beneath worn hands, vessel filled with oil drawn slow, her lamp cast thin ring upon pale wall, a list traced faint in script. She worked in hush, each motion measured, each breath drawn long. For the scribes beyond the stone, word waited upon line. Brother Lucas unfurled scroll upon cold slab, ink traced with sure hand. A name entered, a passage marked. He paused, gaze lifted to high arch unseen. A murmur passed faint upon breath. Then, the seal pressed firm. For the unseen watchers of this place, the hour held no sleep. Within recess deep, a figure moved soft between beam and wall. Eyes marked each shadow, each flicker of cloth, each turn of key. No name spoke, no light drawn close, and through the stone, the breath of the city folded inward. Beyond the high vault a bell tolled single note, low, drawn. Its sound trembled through wall and bone. Brother Lucas gathered scroll and lamp, stepped slow upon worn path. Above the nave lay vast in shadow, its banners hung still, its breath held deep, and beneath worn velvet the keys sang faintly once more. Beyond the last chambered stair, beyond the breath of vaulted stone, the city's walls stood cold against the night, their ancient ribs pressed hard beneath moonless sky. Above, the wind whispered thin between battlement and beam, a sound older than word. Along the outer walk, frost traced faint across iron rail. Flags hung stiff, rimmed in pale sheen. And below, gates barred thick in oaken weight. For the guards upon the wall, the night bore long vigil. No merchant's call, no rider's tread, only the cold and stone and time. At the east tower, 2 figures passed beneath narrow arch, steps drawn soft upon damp stair. Their breath rose faint in the still air. Eyes marked each shadow, each flick of cloth. At the high gate Master Otto leaned against worn post, key ring heavy upon thick belt. A lamp burned low at his side, each hour traced in silent count, each sound marked in thought. For the scribes who tracked the gate's turn, the night brought slow record. In narrow chamber beneath tower stair, Brother Lucas bent low above thin scroll. A single name marked faint in ink, the last to pass before the lock was drawn. He sealed the note with care, placed it deep within the chest of brass. Its weight spoke of nights unbroken. For the unseen beneath the gate, the hour pressed close. In a hollow beneath the outer arch, a boy crouched near rough beam, eyes wide against the dark, a crust of bread held firm in thin hand. He watched as guards passed, boots muffled against stone. Their light caught pale upon damp wall, yet none marked the hollow where he sat. For the merchants delayed beyond dusk, the gate held no favor. Beyond the drawbridge, beneath frost-veiled span, a lone cart stood, its driver hunched beneath thick cloak, hands clasped round worn reins, eyes set upon sealed gate. No bell would ring, no latch would lift, not this night, for the guards upon the final turn. Each key bore weight. At the western lock, Master Otto drew thick ring from side, metal scraped soft against iron mount, a breath drawn deep, the bolt slid home. Beyond, the city breathed slow in sleep, and none would pass. For the women within the tower's shade, the dark held quiet task. Anna moved beneath cold beam, her lamp a pale thread through vast stair, a ledger clasped tight beneath thin arm. Each door checked, each lock marked sure. At the final turn she paused. Fingers traced worn brass. A prayer whispered faint beneath breath. And through the stone the breath of the city folded deep. Beyond the high ramparts stars flickered faint behind thinning cloud. Wind pressed soft beneath cloth and mail. The guards watched, the stone held, and beneath the nave a forgotten light flickered alone. Deep within the hollow hours of the night, the city held to its slow, unseen breath. Streets ran dark beneath shuttered window. Lamps guttered faint in thickening fog. Above, no stars broke the weight of sky. Stone drank each sound, each step. Walls pressed close with chill older than memory. Timber strained faint beneath unseen weight. For those who watched unseen, the hour spoke soft. Beneath the arch of the old cloister a figure moved slow, cloak drawn close. Gloved hand traced faint upon rough stone. No word passed, no eye marked. For the scribes who lingered past candles' fall, the ink grew thin. In a cold chamber beneath tower's root, Brother Lucas bent once more above pale page. A name marked soft, a line drawn spare. His quill paused, breath stilled. No bell would mark the next moment. No seal would close this night. For the guards upon the high walk, the stone grew heavy. At the northern post, 2 figures stood beneath frost-bound arch, spears upright, eyes tracing pale breath in narrow beam of lamp. Beneath, the gate remained fast. Beyond, the road lay dark, empty. A lone dog crossed the far edge of sight. Shadow upon shadow. No voice called, no hand stirred. For the women within the upper halls, the hour held its own hush. Anna moved through long corridor dim. A single lamp swung from thin chain. Its light folded slow across pale tapestry and worn lock. Her steps counted soft, each latch touched, each cloth drawn close. For the lost beneath the stone, the breath ran thin. In a hollow beneath crumbling stair the old man slept, or seemed to sleep. Hands curled tight against thin chest, breath shallow. Above no sound called, only stone pressed near. For the merchants bound in silence. The hour bore no favor. Herr Albrecht stood alone within high room. A single scroll lay open upon worn desk, ink dried in pale stroke. He watched the window, dark pane against deeper dark. No step would cross the square this hour, no bargain would seal. For the unseen within the cloth of the city. The threads drew tight. A boy slipped beneath leaning arch. Bare feet silent upon frost-kissed stone. Eyes wide within hollow dark. Ahead a single door stood ajar. Faint light spilled upon worn flags. He watched, waited, and did not move. Above the bells stood silent, their tongues cold within heavy throat. The city breathed deep beneath its stone, and through forgotten corridors soft footsteps echoed.